Boris, when he turned 2, little Boris, he had his pacifier in his mouth. He would watch me drawing. I told him, this is Daddy's art. You can't touch this art. You see how all my drawings are inside these panels, and so we have to stay away from all that art, Boris. And one day I was working on a piece. It was for someone else's book, and so to save time, I wound up taking a regular page of paper but drawing 2 comic book pages on it. I had it, I think, pretty well finished, all inked and everything, two pages. And I had it left on the table so that I could finish it up. I came back to my table and I looked down at this art, and on the paper, right down the middle of it, is blue marker, all just filled in. And I looked at it, I just went, he couldn't believe that I was upset, and the tears started coming down his eyes, and he's got his pacifier in his mouth, and he's going, Daddy, I was doing like you said. You said don't draw on the art, draw inside the margins, and it's okay. And if you look on the art, look how I only drew in the margins, so I didn't think I was ruining your art. And I was just going, and I took him and I said, Boris, you can't draw on Daddy's artwork.
Yeah, my daughter drew on a page of mine once. A lot of artists, with, trying to get work done at home with young children, and it's a crapshoot, like what's going to happen there. I don't think I ever, outlawed my table to my daughter, but she kind of knew to stay away for the most part. I think she must have been 3 or 4, maybe a little older. And so it was a really hard job, and it was a ton of work in them, and I'd gone to bed the night before, and I woke up the next day, and my daughter had been up for several hours or whatever, and I sat down on my table, I started working on this page, and I was like, what? Something looks wrong. And then I noticed in the sun, or the moon, or whatever it was, there's like some kind of a face. All of a sudden I realized it was my daughter had drawn on this thing and just really ruined this bit of a panel. And she'd walked into the studio around the same time, and I go, and she came around to the side, and I yelled at her, it was reflex. And she, it startled her. And I scared the crap out of her, and I couldn't. It took me a second to kind of bring myself back down and realize it was, she didn't know what she was doing. I don't know. I probably overreacted.
I was doing a magazine cover, so I spent a whole day penciling it and inking it, and it had been a long day. So I decided, well, I'll paint it tomorrow. I'll finish it up tomorrow. And I left it on the dining room table. So I got up the next day all ready to finish it up, and I looked down and it was covered in ballpoint pen and Sharpies and crayons, and it's just like, it's like, and there's literally no way I can salvage it, And I look over, and there's my stepdaughter Gabrielle, and she's all smiling and beaming. And I'm like, you did this, right? And she's like, yes, I'm helping. Came home one day, and there was Sharpie drawings all over the wall. And I'm like, why did you do this? I wanted to be like you. And it's like, well, how can you get mad? The solution was I got her own little drawing board, and I set it right next to mine. So she had her own table and her own materials and her own little chair. And she could not sit next to me and draw. We were sharing work time. Which is one of the great things about being an artist and having a family, is that you don't have to leave them. It's like you experience life together.
It started when I was 8, and I saw my father doing a Daredevil cover, number 12, and after not pretty much ignoring what he was doing, because he was doing romance comics, he did a Daredevil cover. To this day, that was the moment that I knew I wanted to be a cartoonist. Kazar in the tree, Daredevil surrounded by bad guys, and when I found out that he was a superhero and that he was blind, I think the top of my head exploded. And from that on, my father said, I sat down and started drawing at his feet. I was 8 years old. He was always encouraging.
Well, the kids never bothered their father. It was a no-no to go into to his studio, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Dad. That's it.
I have like a fence that went across the half of the door, so they couldn't come in. Was the very first, the girl.
Yeah, when they were small.
When they were small.
Fenced out of your. Because one time our daughter, our little toddler, she was our first, came into your studio and knocked over the black ink and walked all over. It was like, so that.
I mean, funnily enough, growing up, my dad worked in planning, in sort of town planning and architecture, and he used to draw plans in the evening. So I've got memories of him in our dining room with his drawing board and the angle for his lamp and the cigarette burning slowly in the ashtray and him drawing something. And I understood then that when Daddy's sitting there, he's working. I do remember one time going in there and he had a box full of tools and pen nibs and looking in there, and there was a loose razor blade in there, and I cut my finger, and that taught me don't mess around with Dad's stuff.
When in the beginning I was drawing at the kitchen table, and I would have to do the day job, get the kids all situated, and then when everybody went to bed at about 9, then I started work, and I would work till 2 or 3. And back when I started SIP, my kids were too young to look at what I was drawing. So I'm drawing like this, you know.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff that, if they come in the room, I like cover up and say, no, yeah. Or just set it aside quickly and cover it up when I, go to bed at night so they don't, see it in the morning or anything. The other stuff, I let them come in and, draw next to me and do stuff together. Yeah, I never had insomnia until I had kids, and you wake up in a cold sweat thinking, I gotta figure out a way to make money, right?
Yeah.
You can do without. Your kids can't do without.
I have a family, and to me, responsibilities and stuff like that I have that I've always kind of put that stuff in the forefront rather than the work. Because even though I work nonstop, and it's usually because I need to pay the rent, put food on the table. That's why I do it. Someone asked me one time, would you still do comics if you couldn't make a living at it? And I said, no. And they were kind of like shocked. It's like, well, don't you love comics? And, yeah, I do. But I wouldn't do it if I had to make a living doing something else, because I'd be making a living doing that, And I would probably still draw as a hobby for fun because I enjoy it. But to tell stories, to me, to do comics, you have to invest something in that. You really have to invest yourself in the work. So if you're going to invest yourself that much into work and it's not going to be, you're not going to be able to make a living at it, I'd rather invest myself into working at a living and then actually live my life, which is far more important to me than telling stories of an unreal nature.
What's nice about my job is that it's pretty much flexible as long as I can control my hours, or control my deadlines rather. The job is super flexible. So, I take my daughter to daycare, and my wife has a regular 9-to-5 job. So it's easy for me to, like, if my daughter needs to be at something, I can always go. And then my wife has the guaranteed paycheck, which is nice as well. So it's nice kind of having that mix. I tell people that when they ask for advice, it's like, draw from life and also marry someone who has a real job.
I'm trying not to fall into a house husband role, basically, because I'm a morning person. I like cleaning, but you can easily spend all your day you being like, oh, I just mowed the lawn and did all the laundry, I cleaned the bathroom. Like, this is still a work day. Yeah. So carving out, I guess the discipline of carving out and polarizing your time working out of the house, where you're like, okay, just like forget that this is your home. It is now your office until 5 o'clock. Yeah. It's been a little bit of a struggle, but definitely getting better at it. My wife now works, her office is kind of out of the house too, so we both really don't know how that's going to go, and I imagine we'll have to figure out an entirely new schedule by which drawing works, being a dad works, and trading off those duties. So like I'm a chronic morning person, I'm ready to go, but I'm even prepared if necessary. I'll have to reverse my whole schedule, be the kind of person who is dad until 4 o'clock, and then it is time to get chopping on some books.
To be honest, my sons didn't know I even drew comics until they were about 10 years old, right? Because they just thought Dad sat in a room, played loud music, watched monster movies, and drew all day. And poor mom's got to carry the weight. So it was very odd to have my oldest son shake my hand, congratulating me for having a job all these years. You know, and I go, what are you telling everybody? You know, when you die, you don't want to say he was a great Batman artist. You go, he was a really good dad. That's what they should say. He was a good dad. He was a good husband. That's it. It shouldn't be this other thing.
How's Chris as a husband and father?
Chris is a great dad. Chris is a really amazing dad, and I think the fact that he has stayed so connected to comic books, and I mean, the boys love reading comic books with him. And you know, I have pictures of Oscar when he was like, 4 months old, sitting there reading comic books with Chris. And recently Oscar said to me, Mom, it's really funny, when I was 3.5, you were my favorite, and Dad wasn't my favorite, but now Dad's my favorite and you're not my favorite. And I just thought, that's a natural order of things. And I just thought, well, of course, I don't read comics, I don't play with Legos, I don't come up with all these cool sound effects when we're pew 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 when we're playing, and they want to get in there and draw with him. I mean, even at bath time, you should see them, they've got all these little army guys lined up, and they've got a whole saga going on in there in the bathtub. So he's a really great dad, and he's really patient. And I think we both are so sleep deprived after years of having small kids, that we both have our moments where it's really hard for us to be patient with the boys when they're perpetually making messes, or having a meltdown, or whatever it is that small kids do. But I think that for the most part he's very patient with them, and he's really good at teaching stuff, and he's really good at explaining concepts to Oscar. He tries very hard.